There's something about Ireland, I mean, I guess they're just slightly behind us, but they've just managed to preserve their
cultural
their identity, and we haven't.
But this
and my
is
girlfriend's Irish, and she has a go at me. She goes, "You don't understand how much identity the English have abroad and how you're perceived." And I'm like, "You're talking about stuff that's 20 years ago."
Yeah.
And I think it's a major problem. We have lost track of who we are.
For the wrong to rule, the good must just stand idly by.
Hello, happy Sunday, everybody. I'm renaming the show "Where Are You From" from now on, because I think that's fine. I hope you're all having a nice time. So you should ask people when you meet them, where are you from? It's completely normal. Anyway, I'm joined this week by Dominic Frisby, who has written a most beautiful musical called Kisses on a Postcard, from a play that his dad wrote, and it's, I believe, Dom's sort of life's work, his belief, your piece. So it's a Thespy show.
It's a Thespy show.
Talk to me.
I'll talk to you in a sec about Kisses on a
Where
Postcard.
are you from, first of all?
Well, I heard somebody on stage saying, somebody went, "Where are you from?" And then it was qualified, no, but where are you from?
Maybe we should call it that instead.
Yeah, where are you from?
No, where are you really from?
Yeah.
You really trigger them.
From. So yeah, this is a story I've been working on for a long time, and it's kind of my life's mission in a funny kind of way. And I'll tell you the background to the story later in the show as we talk about it. But I want to start by telling you this is a musical that my dad wrote about his experiences as an evacuee during World War II. So it's a story, and we've adapted it during the lockdown into this musical thing. And I'm just going to start by telling you one story from the show. It's called Kisses on a Postcard. And this is why it's called Kisses on a Postcard. So it's beginning of World War II. We're in London. The last soldiers have just come back from Dunkirk. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. It's the Churchill line. All the cities are going to be bombed. The Blitz is coming. They know it's coming. And so they're evacuating all the children across the UK from the cities to the countryside. But when they're evacuating them, they're taking them from their parents. And this is World War II. We don't have mobile phones or any of this stuff. They don't know where they're going, how long they'll be going for, who'll be taking them in. The parents are literally just tying labels on them with their names and saying goodbye. And this was every child. I think if the kids were under 5, your parents could go with you, but every child from the age of 5 to 15. And I think something like 4 million children across the country were evacuated. It was the biggest movement of people in our history. And you can imagine the wrench for the parents. You literally do not know if you will ever see your kids again. And my grandmother, in order to turn it into an adventure for my dad and his brother, my dad was 7, his brother Jack was 11, Terry and Jack, she decided to turn it into an adventure for them by giving them a secret code. And this was the code. She gave them each a postcard, and when they got to where they were going, nobody knew where. They were to write the address of where they ended up, and the postcard just said on it, "Dear Mum, arrived safe and well, love Jack and Terry." But here was the code. They were to put 1 kiss if it was horrible, and then Mum would come straight down and get them. They were to put 2 kisses if it was okay, and they were to put 3 kisses if it was nice. So that was their secret code. And then they walk off to the station, Deptford, southeast London. That's where my dad was from. And the whole school marches off to the station, and they're put on this train at Deptford station. The train goes all the way across London and then all the way through the home counties, Surrey, Wiltshire and so on. And it ends up in Cornwall. And at Liskeard, they get off the train, and then they're all put on buses and fanned out into the nether regions of Cornwall. And Dad and about 50 other kids from his school ended up in a tiny village called Dobwalls, about 50 of them. And they were herded into the village hall, and they just had their little labels on and their gas masks, and they stood there, and then the locals, who all had these strange, funny Cornish voices, all came and picked them at random. "I'll take that one there." And the big instruction that Dad was given was, "You stay together. don't leave your brother, you stay together. And Dad and his brother were chosen by this Welsh couple. And we learn about the Welsh couple through the course of the story. He had been a soldier in World War I, a real kind of Bevin socialist Welsh guy, worked in the coal mines, was a soldier in World War I, was involved in a thing called the Mametz Wood Massacre, which is when the Welsh bantams, they were all under 5 foot, came up against the Prussian Guard, who were all over 6 foot. And in the entire battle, only 17 people survived, one of whom was this Welsh guy. Wow. So he was a real anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian. And they lived in this tiny cottage with their son Gwyn, who was a soldier. And so Dad and his brother were chosen by them. They were taken back to this cottage. He worked on the railways, the man, Uncle Jack, he worked on the railways. And so their cottage was number 7 railway cottages. It was right by the railway. Dad and his brother, from that generation that were obsessed with steam trains, they loved them. The steam trains going past the end of their garden. They walked into their house, tiny, tiny cottage, no electricity, only oil lamps. You know, we take electricity for granted now. No electricity, cat asleep by the fire, canary in a coal mine. Dad and his brother just got a single bed and they have to top and tail. Which they said, we do that at our cousins when we're on holiday. There's a pig in the garden, some chickens, then outside, you know, valleys and woods and rivers to dam and, you know, countryside to explore. And Dad and his brother thought they had died and gone to heaven. They loved it. And this first scene that I'm going to play you now is 20 minutes into the musical. It's their first night. The 2 boys have just arrived. They've said goodnight and they're in bed by candlelight discussing how many kisses they should put on their postcard. Play.
Don't forget, our code.
How many kisses?
1 kiss if it's nasty,
And then you'll come straight away and get us.
2 kisses if it's okay,
And 3 kisses if it's nice.
That's right, boys.
We're on a steam train to the country.
Yeah, I'll take this one, yeah.
How many kisses?
I vote 3.
What would Mum and Dad think of it here?
Don't know.
No electricity. They wouldn't like
I
that.
don't care.
There's no bathroom.
I don't care.
Outside lab, all they have. I can't go in an outside lab.
I don't mind. I don't care.
What if it's freezing cold out there?
That's what the pot's for, don't you see?
I vote 1.
I vote 3.
Just 1 bed, got to share, all squashed up in it.
I don't care.
Kisses on a postcard we must write. Something we've got to do tonight. Kisses on a postcard, what'll they show? Only Mum is going to know.
What about Gwyn?
Gwyn's not bad, even though you can see he's mad.
Auntie Rose, what do you say?
She says weird things, but she's okay. Not Uncle Jack, though, he plays rough. Pulled my hair, called me scruff.
Kisses on a postcard, what do we do?
I still say 3.
Well, I say 2.
Kisses on a postcard, 3, 2, 1. Better be quick or it won't get done.
If we put less than 3, Mum and Dad will think it's rotten here. They'll be worried.
Yeah, well, there's the trains, they're good.
And the station, right next to us.
That's terrific.
Hey, wait! I've just remembered. Hens!
What about hens?
Eggs, stupid. Real eggs. Not that horrible powdery stuff. Eggs for you, eggs for me, eggs for breakfast, supper and tea. Poached or baked, scrambled or fried.
Aboard with soldiers on this side.
What do you say now? What's your score?
All right, 3.
I say 4.
You can't.
Why not?
Mum only said up to 3.
But don't you see, the more kisses we put, the more happy they're going to be.
Yeah, it's terrific here, really, isn't it? Like being on holiday, only there's no sea.
We don't have to stop at 4. Let's do hundreds.
Yeah!
Kisses on a postcard, one by one, all round the edges, this is fun. Kisses on a postcard, squashed up tight, telling Mum that we're all right.
Good night, children, everywhere. Your mommy thinks of you tonight. Lay your head upon your pillow. Don't be a kid or a weeping willow. Close your eyes and say a prayer, and surely you can find a kiss to spare.
Kisses on a postcard, kisses on a postcard.
Though you are far away, she's with you night and day.
This is fun.
Good night, children everywhere.
Telling Mum that we're all right.
Night, Jack.
Night, Terry.
Look at them, fast asleep. And they've covered the card in kisses. Night-night, boys.
Kisses on a Postcard by Terence Frisby. To find out more about the show and to listen in full, go to kissesonapostcard.com.
Wowzers. You forget how insane this was for children. Imagine the kids
parents.
nowadays. And the parents. I get upset when I don't see my kids for a couple of weeks, I feel.
How old are your kids?
10 and 14, so they're older. But it's so important, such fortitude of everybody.
Everyone.
The whole fabric was
There were
ripped
people
apart.
who never saw their kids again, or kids who never saw their parents, or their parents died, or, with the world as it was then, families just got separated. It was just an incredible wrench. And I don't know what the long-term consequences are for families across the country, but there are lots of people whose parents were evacuated, and some of the kids had happy experiences. My dad, broadly speaking, had a happy experience, but there were lots who didn't.
It's amazing.
It's the biggest movement of people in our country's history, even bigger than
the current one,
the boats today.
But it's amazing to be taken. It's beautiful as well, because you're really taken back to a completely different time. But carry on with the story. Continue.
So, and it wasn't just a wrench for the families, it was a huge wrench for the villages that had to accommodate all these new kids. Dad describes the situation. He says they were the grey squirrels, the Vaki kids were the grey squirrels, and the local kids were the red squirrels. Because the Vaki kids all came from London, so they were a bit more savvy, streetwise and all that. And a lot of the time they were cleverer than the local kids, who were just, farmers' kids and things like that. And that's no disrespect to farmers, but, sleepy villages...
The BBC are now making content for those people, I read today in the paper.
One day. So for example, they would try and organise like cricket matches and football matches, and the Vaki kids would win like 10-0.
Oh, yeah.
So all that went on, and the local kids, Dad said they would just fight all the time. Vakis with the village kids, all the time, fights. And so it must have been horrible for the villages as well, but people got on with it. They trusted the government. The order had come from on top. It was decided they had to get the kids out of the cities. They probably did. And so this was how they dealt with it. And so over the course of the musical, this is an audio-only musical. I'd love it to be a stage musical or a TV one eventually, but I didn't have the means to do that. But I did have the means to make an audio version of it. And we got very lucky in the recording of it because we did it mostly during the lockdown. We got some quite big stars from musical theatre to be in it. John Owen Jones, Katie Seacombe, Rosie Cavaliero, a few others. And they'd broken our balls at one of these studios about all the singers had to be 2 meters apart and all this stuff. And I was like, I can't do this. And you know, there was a limit. It meant we had to cap the number of people we could have in the orchestra. We had a 15-piece orchestra. So I phoned around all the studios. I said, just to see if I could get another studio. And Abbey Road had a cancellation. Some director and conductor had gone into quarantine for 2 weeks because of COVID. So Abbey Road was free, and we ended up recording a lot of the music at Abbey Road.
Wow.
So that was pretty good. But yeah, and it tells the whole story, the Vacuum the Village Kids. There's a brilliant scene with an old lady called Nanny Peters. They go and steal Granny Peters' gooseberries, and they get caught. And they have to go and apologise to Granny Peters. And Granny Peters is going on about her son, who she had 9 kids and they all were killed in the war. But she's talking about the Boer War, not even the First World War, the Boer War. And Marcia Warren plays her. I don't know if you know Marcia Warren, Olivier actress, award winner. And then we get a great scene is when Plymouth was famously flattened during the war, and Dad was in Plymouth with Auntie Rose, the lady who took him in. And, you know, the whole village can see Plymouth being bombed. And the guy, Auntie Rose, he knows, the man, Uncle Jack knows that his wife and the 2 boys are in Plymouth being bombed. And again, you just see the whole thing ablaze, just red, you know, 10 or 20 miles. They watch it from the tour. So that's a great scene. And then prior to D-Day, the American soldiers all arrive, and the regiment that was billeted on Dad's village, Dobwalls in Cornwall, I think there were lots of regiments, but the one that Dad remembers was all from Louisiana, and it was an all-black regiment. And so, you know, we exploit that like mad. We got some great numbers. We got all the black soldiers coming over. It's really hard to find black guys who can do a genuine Louisiana accent. You couldn't find them in England. In the end, I used a website called Fiverr. Right. And I got genuine New Orleans actors to do that through a website called Fiverr.
What, coming over or doing it remotely?
Just remotely.
Amazing.
Yeah, we couldn't I talked to loads of black guys and none of them could do the accent. And I was like, no, I really, you know, I put a great deal of effort getting all the Cornish, because I think Cornish people get bit cross when you know, there's some drama set in Cornwall and there's loads of outsiders doing Cornish accents, and the Cornish are all like, oh, the accents are terrible. So I just made a point of getting genuine locals.
That's very woke of you.
Well, I
like it.
Yeah, I wanted to get it right.
Yeah.
And so it was the same with the black guys from Louisiana. If this is going to have a market in America, so that was that. And then there was a girl who was like a slightly older girl than Dad, who taught Dad the facts of life.
But go back to Plymouth quickly. So they're getting bombed.
Yeah.
They're watching it from a tour, and were they were in the town as it was?
Dad and his brother. It's a great scene in the show, because what had happened is they'd gone to Plymouth, and Jack, Dad's brother, had bought this sheath knife, like a penknife, and they were both going, this amazing knife, and they were sat in the buffet waiting for the train to come, and then the sirens come in, and they're like, we've got to go down, and they're all put in the underpass to hide from the bombing, and Jack, Dad's brother, has left his sheath knife in the buffet, so they run up to get the buffet, and then Dad's like, Jack, come back, because Dad then finds the sheath knife, and then a bomb goes off right in front of them. Dad tells a story, and it was like, when they heard a real bomb, the real war, they, you know, it was one of the most terrifying things, and he just spent the night shivering in an underpassage. It's a great story, and you mentioned before the show that your dad was in Sussex during the war.
Yeah.
And narrowly missed a Messerschmitt.
I think, yeah, him and his brother were walking, and the story goes that there was a plane shot down plane, narrowly missed them or landed in the field next door or whatever. You know, I suppose it's that thing of being a child and suddenly, as you say, being confronted by absolute doom and death in man-made form and just not being able to process that whatsoever. So weirdly, so timely in a way. I don't quite understand why it's so timely.
I played it to a bunch of people. I played the first 20 minutes to a bunch of people in a car earlier in the year. We were driving somewhere. I said, "Do you want to listen to this?" And it was just as Ukraine was being invaded, and all the Ukrainians. You remember, you see them having the little labels on and sent off on the trains, and everyone said, "This is happening in Ukraine now." Yeah, and it's a timely story. Just coming back to your Messerschmitt thing, we got the same thing happens where it was a pencil that what's the bomb called? Dornier. Yeah.
Why do I know that?
Dornier 19.
I remember that from school.
Yeah. So a flying pencil. That's it. And so one of those has been shot down when Plymouth is being invaded, and Dad's they're in the field, and the plane flies over, and it flies so close to them, they can see the pilots, the eyes of the pilot, and Auntie Rose is just going, "It's just a young man like my son." And then they've got the gunner at the back, and the gunner, as the plane's coming down, the gunner's like looking at this old lady and a boy, and he decides not to shoot them.
Good for him.
Yeah, and then the plane crashes. Because the plane's being shot down, so they're crashing. So he knows he's going to die. They can't, it's too low to parachute out. And he's got that, and he just decided not to, and that was, Dad getting pretty close to death there. Wow. So, I mean, it's just so many amazing stories. And then I was telling you about this girl who sort of was like 3 or 4 years older than Dad and taught him the facts of life and so on. But then as all the soldiers started to come in the village, and she was now 16 by this time, she loses interest in Dad and ends up getting pregnant by one of the soldiers. And I was like, "Dad, you're making this up," because, it was a big scandal, mixed race kid in Cornwall at that time. But then I've gone back since to the village, and I talked to some of the locals, and there's some like local historian, and who was married to one of the kids that Dad used to play with in the street, and she said no, it was a big that she recalled it, that this girl, she had to go off to Plymouth or something.
It happened. I know from a former relationship I had that the grandmother had an affair with a German soldier. Yeah. And they had a baby, and the baby was completely,
Yeah, homes for unmarried mothers. But the thing there was loads of women who became pregnant by American soldiers, but the thing about this is it was black American soldier. So that was the big, but that regiment was there because we've looked it up in the history books and we found it. And anyway, at the end of the play, the big tragedy is that Auntie Rose and Uncle Jack, the family that take them in, their son, Gwyn, is killed in Sicily. And so Jack and my dad and his brother then go, "Okay, one of us is going to go home and one of us will stay here with you and we'll be your son instead of Gwyn." And that was, But then Auntie Rose and Uncle Jack end up taking in Elsie, the girl who became pregnant by the black soldier.
Wow.
I mean, it's cry. But then at the same time, Dad was a comic writer. He wrote, so it's full of, it's funny too. And it's got good songs from me.
That's amazing. It needs to be on the stage. This is the sort of thing I would want to watch. I mean, I can't drag myself to the theatre anymore.
It should be the National Theatre Christmas musical because it's about a peculiar story. Instead of doing Oklahoma or some stupid crap. Yeah. This is
non-binary Oklahoma.
Yeah. This is, it's a story about an important event in our national history.
So it should be in the National Theatre.
Of course it should.
Absolutely, it should be in the National Theatre. I mean, I can't bring myself to watch anything. I watched Banshees of Inisherin last night, which is about as close. It's really good. It's so good.
I've got to watch that. He's Brendan Gleeson. He's been in 2 or 3 really, really good films.
It's an amazing movie because it's just about. It's just you go. Oh, thank God! It's not all just dross that's coming out because obviously we all have the 600 bad films on Netflix that we don't want to watch. But, you know, just going to the cinema and actually watching a properly made film. Is it Martin McDonagh? Is that who?
Yeah.
Yeah, just such a... it's a film about nothing.
The Guard, if you've seen The Guard, it's another film.
Yeah, I have seen The Guard.
And there's something about Ireland, I mean, I guess they're just slightly behind us, but they've just managed to preserve their...
cultural
their identity. And we haven't.
But this
and my
is
girlfriend's Irish, and she has a go at me. She goes, "You don't understand how much identity the English have abroad and how you're perceived." And I'm like, "You're talking about stuff that's 20 years ago."
Yeah.
And I think it's a major problem. We have lost track of who we are.
We've completely lost track of who we are, and we're ashamed of what we were, which is the other thing. So, you know, just on a purely, as you say, on a national interest level, the biggest movement of people in the history of our nation, organised in a time pre-technology, you know, and whole communities just completely uprooted and turned apart, and American soldiers coming over from Louisiana getting local people pregnant. I remember I've got a Cornish friend, and she said to me she has similar views on the BLM thing as I do. And she went, we've done her I can't do a Cornish accent, I won't try. But she said, we had our Black Lives Matter protest in the 1700s or whatever it was, because and that's why we don't drink dark rum or put sugar in our tea.
I know who told you that.
Yeah.
That was Natalie.
Yeah, it was.
And she's had a similar thing with me. The Barbary slave trade. There's this reaction between Cornwall, where it was, south of Ireland, and the west of Africa. You know, I think it was over 500,000 Cornish were stolen into slavery over 200 years into North Africa. You never hear that story. And you know, there's just loads of because of the boats and the way the world was, there was loads of interaction between Cornwall and Africa and the west coast of Spain and Portugal. There just was, and there was loads of trade and war and trade, the two come together.
So do you think
Nat tells us the anti-slavery movement, like Britain was ahead of everywhere else in the world, but Cornwall was a generation ahead of Britain.
Really?
And they boycotted rum and they boycotted sugar because of the Barbary slave trade. They knew what went on.
Why are we not teaching kids this and telling them that, you know, that those that came before were just such, you know, obviously there's rotten apples in every basket.
Yeah.
But why are we focusing on the rotten apples all the time? We're destroying our cultural identity, and we're willingly doing it because of all of our institutions. I mean, you say the National Theatre. Chances of that being shown at National Theatre, 0. Unless there was an actual movement, which actually we should do. We should lobby the National Theatre to tell a proud national story starring, you know, we should.
I used to have huge rows with my father about, because he says his career only got started because of subsidised theatre.
Right.
And I hate the subsidy of the arts, because once you have subsidised theatre, then politics and theatre get involved.
It. Yeah.
And you know, you're beholden to your paymasters and all that. And you know, I don't like. I'd love this to be on in the National Theatre, and I've seen good things at the National Theatre, but cripes, that place disappears up its backside.
It so does. I mean, I keep looking at in sort of dread about their production of The Crucible, but I think I'm going to have to go and watch it just to see how they managed to ruin it.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure that they will. But it's happened. It seems to have happened quite
And they
fast.
do something like Warhorse, which is brilliant, which is it's an English story.
I grew up going to National Theatre because I was, you know, interested in it. It was the only way you could really get out of boarding school, and you could go and hide and smoke and watch a play and all of the things. And you know, the teachers would turn a blind eye if you had a beer and all this sort of stuff. And it used to be a real hub, and it now still is a hub, but just for a very small minority of people who hate everything about the country.
I know, and the weird thing is, its audience is so loyal, and you know, you know what I mean when I talk about invisible casting. So, you know, you'll have, I don't know, an Ibsen play, and you'll have a black person playing something in an Ibsen play, and it's invisible casting. And everyone was fine with that. There was a bit of in sort of 80s and 90s, but broadly speaking, the audience just sort of accepted it. But if you did it the other way round, everyone would go nuts. Yeah. And you watch the audiences, and they're just loyal, nice people who just like the theatre, and they like going to the theatre. And they're brainwashed with all this nonsense, and they keep going, but gradually, just the numbers, they're struggling to get the numbers.
Are they struggling to get the numbers?
You know, whenever there's a hit, you know, there's clearly an appetite for it, and there's an audience there. It's the same audience is Radio 4. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same audience, intelligent, cultured people, good people who want intelligent, cultured entertainment. But you just see the frustration that people have with Radio 4, and the same with BBC, and the same applies to the National.
Well,
I think.
They said that they literally said, the BBC, they were going to make more lighter entertainment for poor people. They said it today, and you're just like, really?
It's just so patronising.
It's-
Dumb up. You know, Dad approached the National Theatre. He could not even get the script reader to read the script. And this is a guy who's written the most successful comedy in the history of the West End. You'd think if somebody's got that... It was 6 years it ran. It's since been overtaken, but it was the longest running comedy in the history of the West End. You'd think with somebody with that track record, the National Theatre would at least read the script.
And this is when? What year?
10 years ago? 15 years ago?
This is insane.
Yeah.
We've got to get... I mean, when I sat down and started doing all of this, they said, with Hosking, he said, what do we do about it? And I, you know, he said, is it a political party? I said, no, it's just a cultural thing. You know, put on some decent plays, and you will have hit after hit after hit after hit. If you put on decent plays,
I
with
agree.
decent actors and musicals and stuff like that, I think we should do it. Why don't we? I mean, how much does it cost to put on a
Millions.
Millions.
And the problem is, the problem with theatre is, like, if one body is subsidised, the National Theatre, it's very hard to compete with something that's got pockets that deep. And so most theatre can't compete. So you either have subsidised stuff, or you have
Mamma
large-scale musicals, jukebox music. Some musicals to work in the West End almost always have some kind of brand recognition. So there might be a jukebox musical, Mamma Mia or whatever it is, or it'll be something that was, you know, The Sound of Music, Oliver, something that people already know. It's very hard to do something new.
But
there
that's
are
why-
exceptions, Book of Mormon, but that came from America.
Yeah, but it also did have brand recognition because it had Trey Parker and those guys as
Yeah.
part of it, you know. So they were huge already. So
It's-
when your ticket to that was also, I remember I went to watch Book of Mormon and I was watching sort of cast number 15, and it's still, I was looking at the ticket price going, I could go on holiday for this evening that we've done, and there's got.
I loved it, so I went to buy some more tickets the other day on Black Friday, and the best seats in the stalls were 300 quid.
Yeah, I think that's what I paid, something like that for.
So take family of 4, that's 1,200 quid.
It's
So much money.
It's insane. So in terms of putting it on, so say in a found space, in a, you know, or something like that.
This is this is one of the reasons I did it as an audio thing. It's very hard to... The problem with the theatre is you do it for 3 weeks or however long the run is, and then it's over, and
Yeah.
it's gone. At least doing it audio, it's permanent.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I wanted to do. It's Dad's story, but I fell in love with it a long, long time ago, and I've developed it and so on. But I just wanted to make it permanent.
Yeah.
And that's what you can do with the internet, and it's just there forever. The other problem with putting this show on is it's got 15 kids in it,
Right.
and probably another 15 adults, cast of 30, musicians. It's an expensive show to put on.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and what I'm learning with this show is it's people love it, but it's slow, and it's just incremental, and you don't have time in the West End for that. You've got to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
If you don't sell out your first couple of weeks, you struggle.
Yeah.
And so commercially, it's very... so hopefully the audio, because it really is building, and I'm getting, Laurence, the nicest emails from people.
Good.
And, you know, it's just, you can just feel it, just gradually the snowball starting to roll. And hopefully it becomes big enough so that it actually has a brand recognition, and then it can come into the theatre. But the National Theatre is supposed to be there to put on stuff that doesn't
Like
need
this.
brand recognition.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, you know, that's the point of the National. It's subsidised, so you put on stuff that otherwise wouldn't get on, which is this.
Yeah.
And the fact that it would be a massive hit for them.
Have you approached the National with that?
Not recently.
Not really.
No, I mean, Dad approached them 10 years ago, but my experience with these big organisations is that they need to come to you. If you go to them, it's like, I don't know, if you, and I don't have the contacts, I don't mix with the right circles, but you know, it's hard. It's so much who you know and the rest of it. But my general thing is they need to come to you. It's like, you know, when you're looking for acting work, if you start emailing casting directors, it doesn't have that much effect. Whereas if the casting director phones you up and goes, I want you and I'd like to meet you about being in this thing, it's a totally different dynamic.
I had the privilege of being in that small pool of being hired often and repeatedly. And then, it was quite a swift exit from it. From that
For wrong views.
For wrong thing. But it's just so brilliant and so beautiful and so nice to have done a one of these about art and creativity, because actually one of the things I was thinking yesterday when I was, you know, we've talked about how crappy how much we're destroying our national cultural identity. I had a little sort of bit in my throat when I was watching Banshees of Inisherin, because I was just going, that's what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And you just, no, you're not. We're going to do this, and you've got to think this if you want to be an old drama, mate. And I just go, how on earth is that good for a cultural debate? How can we protect something we hate? You know, it's a sorry state, but I really do hope that we get it turned around. And I do hope someone at the National Theatre's got some balls, because you can make your name off something like this.
Yeah, and your fortune.
Yeah.
If you're the director and you get your little 1 or 2% royalties, like what's his name, the guy directed, like Trevor Nunn, you know, you get your little
1% of Les Mis.
Yeah, and you're made.
Oh, bless Trevor Nunn. He offered me a couple of jobs and I turned them both down. Those were the days. Dom, thanks so much for coming and talking.
My pleasure. Thanks, Laurence. And let me just plug the website, kissesonapostcard.com.
Kissesonapostcard.com. Get on it, watch it, and have a tear in your eyes. I have.
And can I just say, it's free as a podcast. You can get it for free as a podcast. But if you want a CD, and it's a great Christmas present for an ageing relative, you've got to buy the CD, but the podcast is free. The CD and the podcast are the same.
What's the website again?
Kissesonapostcard.com.
Kissesonapostcard.com. Bye, guys. Have a lovely Sunday. Spend your Sunday with it. That's what I'll be doing. Bye.